Hello and welcome to another incredible episode of Crush Your Mountain. This is our personal growth episode, and in this episode, we will be talking with a therapist for 23 years, Mr. Clint Callahan. He's an amazing guy and a personal friend of mine, and we're going to talk about how the odds were stacked against him and how he thrived in the face of those odds. How did his parents shape his perspective? We'll talk a little bit about how he recovered from being hit with a major loss in his life, how he lost his business in the 2008 real estate crisis. We're going to ask him what it takes to pull out of emotional mire. The takeaways of this is going to be that life is the most precious thing one can have, and to be present in the moment. What it means to have heart and head. How can we use that to reframe our perspective? What is the equation for a positive outlook? And how can bullying happening among kids who are friends? Our perspective. What is the equation for a positive outlook? And how can bullying happening among kids who are friends? Are sticks and stones really more hurtful than words? You know the old saying? Or is being stuck a form of fear, and how to overcome it? So we've got a lot to cover today with our good friend. So please listen carefully, take notes, and see how we can shape your life. What is the standard of manhood, and how can it be effective or even effectively established? Pay attention and let's take a listen. All right, well, I'm going to bring my man on now. It is so good to have him with us. Clint, what's been going on, man? Go ahead and unmute yourself, bud.
All right. Oh, sorry about that. No, things are going good. My name is Clint Callahan. I'm the therapist and life coach for 23 years. And I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you for having me here. I look forward to our conversation.
Look, I'm going to tell you, it's good to have you. We talked for a bit, and Crush Your Mountain is about the struggle that each individual has. See what I'm saying? And so important that people get examples. And I'll tell you the truth. Your story inspires me, and I get the inspirations from so many others, be it health, wellness, or in this case, personal growth. So, yes, you've been a therapist for 23 years, and you're a life coach as well. But now you weren't always in that business. And in fact, you basically were born with the odds against you. Please tell us a little bit about that. Talk about
I'm more than happy to do that. So I was born 47 years ago. And when I was born, I weighed 1 pound, 15 ounces. At the lowest weight that I got to was about 1 pound, 9 ounces. And, 47 years ago, they didn't have all the medical technology that they have today. It happened to be that my dad was going to school in Minneapolis. And so there was a really good children's hospital there. And my mom actually was supposed to go to her family farm the next day. So if I would have waited 2 or 3 days to decide to come then, I would not be here. And so that's part of the process, right? That's the beginning of my story, because during that time, my mom kept a journal and she wrote about how difficult it was every day coming in, not knowing if I was going to still be alive or not, watching other parents and other families have their children die because they weren't able to make it. And they tried tons of experimental stuff, like a glucose sugar serum to try to, grow my body. But the problem when they did that with other people, with other kids, is that their body grew too fast, but their lungs didn't, and it wasn't able to keep up. And so they passed away, and I didn't accept it for some reason. So there's all these things that happened where, be it God, the universe, divine coincidence, the fact that I'm just really stubborn, and even then, I don't know. But it's those kind of things that since that time, I've decided that, I've always had this, been told by my parents, oh, well, you literally are 1 in a billion. You should not be here, let alone being able to walk, talk, think, see, hear, and be normal. You should not be that way, because that's what happens when you get born premature. So many things can go wrong. And so I beat the odds. I got really lucky. But just because you beat the odds once doesn't mean you beat the odds all the time. Because, like you talk about, right? It's the mountains we climb. That is life. Life is peaks, life is valleys. That is what it is. And all we can do with that is just recognize when we're in the valley, when we're in the peak. Is that sound getting too much on there? I'm hearing a truck drive by.
Well, no, actually, what I did want to touch base with you on, though, was how, how did your parents shape your perspective growing up from that point?
They really attempted to really get me to understand that life is the most precious thing you can have, and that all you can do is be present in it and be present and do what you can to help other people. That's the thing that I grew up with. My mom was basically she was a non-licensed social worker. We had people living in our house. She worked at the children's home. She worked for her church. She worked for Lutheran Social Services. She started an Emotions Anonymous chapter in our town where I grew up. So I grew up watching her do that. And my dad on the other side was nothing but supportive of her and of us. He's an engineer. So I got all the math and science side from him. So when I look at people from a life coaching and a therapeutic standpoint, I look at them really as that weird combination of heart and head. When people are having trouble with what the heart stuff or what their story is telling them, I try to go in and figure out how can I use math to show them that the things that they're feeling are a small percentage of their life, and that it does not define who they are. And so by having that kind of upbringing with them and being loved at home and having that was really helpful. But then on the flip side, when I went to school, in elementary school, junior high and high school, it was really difficult for me. I was bullied a lot.
Well, again, okay, something I can certainly relate to. So now you said that you work with them almost mathematically. Well, what is the equation of a positive outlook?
Sure. So the equation of a positive outlook, at least in my opinion, is when you begin to have a negative story, is you first have to check to make sure, is that reality? Is that really what's going on in your life? And you have to break apart that story and find the giant holes that are in it, because those are easy to find when you really start to look at a negative story, is you find those holes. And once you find those holes, you can then begin to pick it apart towards, well, how does this work? So my main math equation for being positive and being optimistic about things is being mindful is the first component. If you're mindful, if you know how you feel and what is going on inside of you, that is the first piece. And then the next piece is controlling the story that you're telling yourself, because our perception is our reality. So if you can be mindful of where you are and you understand your perception of what's going on, and you can monitor to make sure that you're not getting trapped into the negative story, that then gives you the ability to see the world through a completely different lens. And it takes practice. That's the thing, is none of us are born with these things. This is a this is a skill that you have to practice every day. And it's frustrating when you see people get stuck in that.
Yeah, something, it's easy to get stuck into because we live in a world, in a society, and we live within ourselves in a state of taking for granted.
Yes.
And we forget, or we don't realize, that we even have what we call background chatter. We have that voice within our heads. And for those of you out there that don't think that you have a voice in your head, the voice that just said to you, what voice was that? That's the voice in your head.
Exactly.
And so the idea is to be able to take control of that. Through my method, we do the conceive and commit. So conceiving is conceive of the fact that you have something that you are always talking to yourself. Now, the question is, can you take control of what you say to yourself? But now, you were bullied, and how did you manage that? Did your parents work you through that? Did your mom deal with you through that? How was that handled?
So when I was bullied, the bullying for me was extra confusing, because because bullying happened in my friend group. So as individuals, we were close, friendly, all the stuff, no bullying happened. But when the group got together, it became the group think, where one person would start and then everybody else would join in because they don't want to be the next target. And I get that now, but at the time it was like, well, why is it that when we're alone, everything's cool, but when we're in the group, all of a sudden I'm the butt of everybody's jokes and everybody, wants to do that. And it's like, and it was and it was above and beyond what would be considered normal horseplay for boys and those kind of things, right? Where it was hurtful. And it's one of those things that the whole sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. No, words hurt worse than sticks and stones. Bones heal faster. Words take longer and go in deeper. And it makes it where you really it changes fundamentally the story that you tell yourself about yourself. And that's where the problem occurs.
Especially in the formative years.
Yes.
The reason why various certain organizations, some of them nefarious, insist on introducing things to children at an early age before they're 7 or 8 years old. The reason why is because the brain is forming at that time, but the implantation, the implanting of ideas, experiences, and thoughts, that goes directly to the core of the individual at that time.
Yes. Once you're past the age of, once you get past that, what's considered the age of reason, which is between 7 to 10, is when you're, psychologically speaking, is when your identity and your personality, really the bedrock foundation of who you will become, gets formed. Once you're past that age of reason, it's hard to then plant those seeds because that's like a layer of concrete got put down. And so you have to plant the seeds before that's down there. So then the concrete kind of sets around those other ideas. And that's one of the reasons why having that piece in there is so important, to recognize that. But the best thing about it is you can rip up that concrete anytime you choose to, because it's your story, it's your foundation, it's your choice. But we often forget that. And it's one of the most difficult things is when you work with people and you see them continually hitting the same wall, and you're like, no, you don't, there's a door literally 3 feet to your left. Go through the door. I'll show you the door. Here's the door. Go through the door. And they just can't do it because they're not ready. And that's the hardest thing about being a life coach, being a therapist, being a parent, being a person, is when I see somebody feeling and staying stuck when they don't need to be. All I want to do is see them take that step back and recognize, I don't have to do this anymore.
Does being stuck, is being stuck really a form of fear of moving beyond their comfort zone?
Yes, fear is. So a lot of people don't like it when I say this because it makes them unhappy. But I'm going to say it anyway because this is what I believe to be true. So what I understand about the human body is this: is for 185, it's been 185,000 odd years since we as human beings, merged with Neanderthals and all the kind of stuff, anthropologically speaking, to our last system update, if you want to put it in computer terms, about 185,000 years ago. But recorded history only goes back 5,000 years. The Wild West in America was literally 200 years ago. All these things, it's accelerating, but we biologically are still stuck in biological survival mode. That is different from the fight or flight response that happens in your brain with the thoughts and those kind of things. The biological piece of it is you're stuck in this biological fight or flight, and everybody that's born comes out at about a 1 or a 2, and then life happens. Trauma, abuse, neglect, stress, frustration, bullying, the list goes on, adds to that pre-built-in trauma that we all have from surviving for 185,000 years to get here. And that then, instead of when we going from 1 to 10, when we're in anxiety or fear, we go from 6 to 10, or we go from 7 to 10. And so the gap shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, which creates anxiety more frequently. And all anxiety is just a fear story. We all have that fear story inside of us where it goes, my boss yelled at me. That means I did something bad. That means I'm going to lose everything I have. That means I'm going to lose my spouse, my significant other, my house, my whatever, and then I'm going to end up dead. And it's amazing how fast it goes from this person is unhappy with me to my death, because it's the survival story. And that's the greatest fear, that it ends in us no longer being here.
So just to bring it into a cultural perspective on the community. So, you know, it's not just trauma on a personal level.
Nope.
Okay, you also have to remember there's community trauma, there is cultural trauma, there is ethnic trauma. All of us are dealing with that. And in fact, when you think about the certain practices in certain households, certain cultures, okay, let's just look at the disciplinary style. Okay,
Yes.
One can make the argument that the occasional harsh disciplinary actions of one can be traced back to a trauma on a cultural ethnic level.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember talking with some friends of ours, and we were just talking and joking about what we grew up with as kids, and stuff like that, and how parents would, you misbehaved, parent grabbed the broomstick, parent grabbed the ruler, parent grabbed the extension cord, parent grabbed the hanger, whatever was there, you got whooped. Okay. If you were the West Indian brand or West Indian extension, so to speak, you might know the term sweet touch tea, which was the branch that you went and got for grandma, the switch. You see? But then in our discussion, when we discussed those things, our friends who were not part of the ethnicity, they were mortified.
Yeah, like how could that possibly happen? Oh my gosh, that's so horrible. But yet to you as the child, that was life. That was the way it is. But that's the thing, right? Is I often tell when parents are struggling with their kids, and with, even with my own kids, I often think about, well, it comes back to all you know is what you know until you get out into the world, and then you get to make your own assumptions. Because for the first, if you're lucky, 18 years with a good, healthy family, you go out in the world and you're launched into this way, and not everybody has that. Right. So when you're in a family where there's abuse, addiction, violence, all these different things, that also creates and colors, and then that colors the way you see the world. And then you throw in, let's say you're living in a rich part of town versus a poor part of town, and even if the same thing happens in those different places, rich versus poor, the trauma is different for each person. And the amazing thing and the scary thing is that they now know that trauma, post-traumatic stress, they're trying to get a change from post-traumatic stress disorder to post-traumatic stress injury. Because with the technology we have now, they can scan your brain. And if you think about a traumatic moment, they can actually see it light up in your brain, and they can see damage in your brain from the traumatic event, because it's like an electrical wire that gets superheated, and that wire kind of melts and fuses. That's what happens in the human brain. And it's
Shout
amazing.
out to Dr. Daniel Amen, because he was one of those that really pioneered them. It was like this 80,000 brain scans to show that there is actual responses, physical manifestations of various illnesses. And that speaks to so many challenges that people deal with. But I want to pivot a little bit back to you and how things went with you. You were born at this point, you grew up, you're growing up. Okay. You dealt with the bullying. You began to understand it. But now, at some point, you had a major tragedy in your support group. Could you talk a little bit about that and tell us about your experience there? Are you thinking about
being really angry as a child, to then having my first brush with therapy? And then after having that first brush with therapy, I started to really get interested in therapy. And so then I went to graduate school. Graduate school, all that stuff, got through the bullying, all those things. And then I moved to California. I met my wife, and then my mom got sick when I was about 26 with an autoimmune disorder that basically took her from being a healthy 50, late 40s, early 50-year-old to having the body of a 90-year-old in the space of about 3 years. And she ended up committing suicide. And that created basically, I lost my brain for about a couple of years. And when I did that, it was one of the hardest things because, she was my mom. And it was the hardest thing to go through, to watch her go through that suffering and then have issues with her faith and have issues with everything at the end of her life, which was so much the cornerstone of her, was one of the hardest things to see. And then after that, I lost my mind for a bit. I didn't do therapy for a couple of years. I started a real estate business. 2008 happened. Everything collapsed. I then had to go live with my in-laws and with our newborn son in their house for the next year and a half, which was a major humbling experience. But it also snapped me out of the grief and the loss and just the spin that I was in, so that I had to decide, how am I going to change my life? What am I going to do to be the kind of man, husband, father that I wanted to be? Because I was tired of basically being sick and tired all the time.
You
And
notice
so,
I had to
yeah,
point to you when you said be the type of man, okay? And that
yeah,
speaks to, again, something else that's very important, very crucial that I've been noticing just over the past few years in dealing with individuals. You know, in a household,
mhm,
what we call the traditional household, a
yeah,
mother and a father is actually
mhm,
very crucial. Why? Because
yes,
you have both the male and the female perspective. The
mhm,
father sets the standard of manhood. And from
yep,
what I gather, talking about your dad, he set a certain standard of manhood. With
yes, he did.
my dad, I'll tell you, okay, as in the later years, our personalities begin to become a very divergent, which
Mhm,
probably caused a lot of friction. But one of the things that my dad set the standard as far as spirituality. My dad set the
mhm,
standard as far as taking care of the household. My dad set the
mhm,
standard as far as protecting the household. And so
mhm,
these are things I live by today. I cannot let a day go by without being there somehow and taking care of my household, taking care of my wife, making sure she's
yeah,
okay. Um, my son, I would take him in the back when he was 2 years old, 3 years old, and show him how to do certain things. Why?
yeah,
Because that is the standard of manhood that was set for me, and therefore
mhm,
I pass it on to him. When parents don't have that, when you just have that one parent or one mother raising the child
mhm, yeah,
without a solid father, not just a
mhm,
boyfriend, not just a
mhm,
living guy, not just a
mhm,
transient relationship,
yeah,
then you have a standard to go by that you can pass on, and you create stability within your life, your
mhm,
family's life, as well as society,
yeah,
community. And that's how it spills out. But talk to us now. You're able to do that. You're able to make that
mhm,
change.
mhm.
What does it take for an individual to pull himself up out of the emotional muck, the emotional mire?
The the thing that I learned is basically what I've built my life coaching platform around, which is, it doesn't take massive effort. It takes small, consistent changes every single day of being mindful, recognizing your emotions, and basically managing four main areas of your life. And if you don't manage these areas of your life, you're gonna have issues. Really, it's, you need to manage how you manage your time, how you manage your connections to people, how you manage your emotions, and making sure that you have purpose in your life. Purpose is the key, because you can manage your time, you can manage your emotions, and you can manage your connections. But if you don't have a purpose-driven life, right? That book, if you don't have a purpose, then all that is for nothing. Then you're basically wandering around without guardrails to get you where you want to go. And so I began to change the way that I viewed my life. And I had to change the way I set my goals. I had to change the way that I interacted with my family and with my kids. I had to become more open and more honest and less locked in myself, because I didn't want to inflict my emotional distress on them and all of those kind of things. And so it took it took me 15 minutes each day for about 100 days of working on these very specific skills of setting time to spend time actively with my kids, setting time actively spending time face to face with my wife, setting time actively making sure that I'm using my time wisely instead of foolishly, not getting sucked into video games, Snapchat, YouTube, Facebook, those kind of things, of becoming and being 100% present in my own life, because that's what happened when my mom died. Is I basically got untethered and became non-present in my life. I became a shell of who I wanted to be. And I had to make those changes because I now had a kid of my own. And my mom would have been disgusted if I would have kept going that way. And I couldn't do that to the memory of her and what she taught me and what my dad taught me and how they raised me. They raised me better than that, right? So I had to make that shift, not for me, but for the people in my life that depended on.
It's so vital that individuals learn those things. We hear the phrase "baby steps" all the time. Yeah. That's what we've always heard. And the thing that we have to do, and is this, and this is what you did. This is what I try to work with my clients on. First thing is it possible? Well, there's nothing that's impossible. Very few things are impossible. Just either improbable or highly improbable. Okay, yep. It is highly improbable that a green scaly flying elephant is going to come through this window in the next 10 seconds. Highly improbable. Is it impossible?
Right? No, there's genetic engineering now, so you never know.
Exactly. So we never know. So the idea is now, what is bringing it back to reality right here, right now? What is possible? For you, the viewer, the individual? Are we trying to lose weight? Are we trying to make a change in our lives? What steps can you take today? It doesn't have to be huge. We love to be grandiose. I have that.
Oh, yeah.
I love to be grandiose,
Yeah.
But the thing where I get the most success is when I take that small step. And when you take that small step, tell me something, how important it is that we celebrate each win. Each step is a win. How important is that?
It's the only way that you keep stepping. It's the only way that you keep going. If you don't celebrate the wins, that's why one of the things that I do in life coaching and in therapy is I always go back and I say, hey, you just went through this hard thing, but look at what you would have done X amount of time ago. 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. Look at what you would have done. Look how you handled it today. And they're like, I didn't even think about that before. I would have handled it that way completely differently than I did today. How? Wow. Well, so I changed. I'm like, yeah, you've made changes, but it's hard, right? It's like when I come on the podcast and I talk about my life, to me, it's just my life. It's nothing special. It's just a life like any of the other 8 billion lives that are going on right now in the world today. But I want people to know that ultimately it comes down to, if you begin to take that first step, if you begin to try, the best advice I can give you is build in failure. Build it in. Make it part of the goal. By building in failure to the goal, whatever goal it is, don't make it a goal that's the top of the mountain, because that's the problem. When you put the goal way up there, you're sitting here at the base of the mountain going, I'm already tired. I don't think I want to do that. That's way up there in the clouds. And I see these footsteps in front of me, and I don't know if I want to follow climbing that giant mountain. But the key is build in failure. Look at your feet, one step at a time, and you will get there. I mean, it took me 100 days to do it, but that's also because I have, at that time, I had 15 years of experience as a therapist. I had about 25 plus years of being in and out of therapy. I had my parents and my mom and my dad that were both engineers and were both therapy-like. And so I had all these extra things that were behind me, that were wind blowing me forward so I could make the change. But that's why finding a good life coach, finding a good therapist, finding a good mentor, finding people in your life that have done the thing that you want to do, and let them help be the wind behind you to get you there faster, is the most important thing to do. And it's a hard thing for me as a man to say, because as a man, I was always told, no, your own bootstraps, you pull them up yourself, you do it yourself, you don't need anybody else. I'm here to tell you, no, that's wrong. No,
You
you
know,
need other people. You need the community to help you get there.
you know, that's so true. But I've come to sort of rethink the idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. I've come to think of it as understanding that the one that has to take the initiative
Mhm.
is you.
That is true.
You can't, there's an old uh, Arabic story that's
Hmm.
in amongst the stories of the 1001 Arabian Nights. Okay,
Hmm.
and the character's name literally was Lazy Bones. He's laying there,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Mommy," he's like 40 some years old. "Mommy,
Yeah.
help me to raise up." And that's good because he's too lazy. Help me to put
Hmm.
my arm into my sleeve. Nobody's
Hmm.
going to do that. We
Yep.
are men and we are women. We have power already. The key is to first take the step. That's where the bootstrap comes,
Yep.
because once a friction takes place,
Hmm.
once you start moving, then everything starts to pick up. That's when all the flakes are gathered to the snowball and it gets bigger and bigger. That's where your support comes. I
Yes.
found that to be the case with me when I was in school, and when individuals saw me reaching out, they reached
Hmm.
out to help me.
Yeah.
So that's a very, very, very true. So let me ask you this now, okay? Um, with me, I have the crush method. I work
Hmm.
with individuals incrementally, and I help them to
Hmm.
conceive, commit, refine, rework, undertake,
Yes.
sustain, and habituate, getting through from point A to point B. My programs range from a 90-day through an
Hmm.
entire year, depending upon the level of service that they need. And
Hmm.
so, how do you offer, or what are your offers when it comes to
Yeah.
helping clients?
So right now I work with people on, I do a twice a week group call, and I have an online video, basically catalog of all the stuff that I talk about. But basically what I'm doing is I teach people over a 14-week period, 30 different psychological tools, so that they have the tools in order to basically face any challenge that happens in front of them. Because I'm a big believer that if you have the right tool, it makes the job easier, right? It's just like if you're trying to fix a car and you have a banana, that's not going to take the bolts off the car. You need a wrench, you need the right size wrench, you need a socket wrench, you need a special wrench to get the spark plugs out, all those kind of things. So what I do is I teach people these tools that they can do in 15 minutes a day by having a very specifically structured worksheet, where basically you watch the video, which is less than 15 minutes, you do the worksheet, which takes you less than 15 minutes. We then discuss it in the group call to talk about how could you implement this in your life. And every step that I do with people is all action oriented stuff. It's not this theoretical, I'm just going to think about it, I'm going to try and understand, but it's a combination of thinking about it, but then these are specific steps that you can do every day to move you down that path. Because the most important thing that I learned in my own journey was momentum. Once I started going, if I stopped, if I stumbled, then sometimes that stumble ended up being weeks of me falling down and not doing it. So I had to figure out a way to keep going. And that's why, again, building failures points into this, where it's like, okay, today was a bad day. It was a wash. This is one of my 3 failure days this month. Okay, that's fine. I can get back on it tomorrow. And it's recognizing that. And that's why I think failure is one of the things that we miss out on teaching our kids and letting ourselves have, is those points, building it into the goal. Because by having the failure, it's now part of the goal instead of this thing that's against the goal, which allows you to then make those small changes every single day, so that you can get to the point where you're now not feeling as burned out, where you're having deeper connections, where you're feeling more understood and recognized and all these things, because you are now understanding and recognizing yourself better. You know yourself, because it always comes back to, if you don't own it, how can you fix it? And that's the thing that I really believe is the most important thing for anybody that wants life coaching, mental health, any kind of change in their life. You first have to say, this is mine and I need to fix it. Because if you don't do that, how can you fix something that's not yours? You can't. Then it's everybody else's fault, everybody else's problem, and nothing gets done. You went mute on me.
No problem. So what's next for you now? You've gone through you've gone
Yep.
through the changes, and
Mhm.
you've crushed through your own mountains, your own obstacles,
Mhm.
and you're helping other individuals to do the same.
Yeah.
What's next on the horizon for Clint Callahan?
Well, I'm still practicing as a therapist, but I did start my life coaching company. Small changes, big impact. I call it. It's small changes, big impact, a 1% per day transformational system. And it's basically designed to help people take accountability, learn those 30 different psychological tools, and then learn how to use those tools to fix those four main areas of their life, right? Time, connections, emotions, and purpose. And it's really comes down to, I'm a big believer that even in this fast-paced world, everybody can find 15 minutes, because really 1% of your day is 14 minutes and 40 seconds. So if you can find 15 minutes of your day to focus on yourself, to focus on self-improvement, you can then begin to focus on your relationships, your family, how you use your time, all these different things. So that in 100 days, in just over 3 months, you can feel better and just more in tune and in touch with yourself, and you can beat any challenge because now you have the right tools for whatever comes your way. So that's kind of what's next for me. Is I'm promoting this, and I just want people to know that they can be more, they can do more, and that everybody has a mountain to climb, but there's so many people out there and so many guides like Henry and like myself that can help you get where you want to go and become who you want to be and have your life be what you want your life to be. You don't have to stay stuck. You don't have to feel like you're failing.
Yeah, that's so very true. And it's so many of individuals uh, right now are suffering in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And many times they don't realize that all they need is the support.
Yeah.
People take that for granted, especially in health coaching, where
Mm-hmm.
they want to jump on a diet and they do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
They go up and they go down. They go up and they go down. They don't
Yep.
realize is that what they don't understand is that they need the support and the accountability so that they can move forward and be steady in their outcomes. Learn how to be intentional with their outcomes. Understand what works and what doesn't work. And
And
anything.
it's the accountability piece.
Yeah,
We all need to be accountable to somebody,
that's
because it's amazing how when you're accountable to somebody, I mean, a lot of my life coaching clients and therapy clients, they come into me and they're like, yeah, so I didn't do the thing. I'm like, okay, why didn't you do the thing? Because you were in my head, and I knew that if I did the thing, I'd have to explain it to you, and I really didn't want to have to explain myself to you. And I'm like, am I really that scary? They're like, no, it's not about being scared of you. It's that I respect you and I don't want your opinion of me to change because I made this, because I did the thing that we've been talking about not doing. And it's like, oh, okay, well, my job is not to judge you. It's that my job is not to sit on high and say, you're bad, you're bad. No, it's to say, okay, how did you get trapped in that? How did you slip back into the muck? How did you do those things? Because let's figure out a way to build better blockades so you no longer slip, so you no longer go there. Because it always comes back to, I'm amazed every day that my job is to be a professional secret keeper and advice giver. I can't believe that that's what I get to do for a living, because it's the most amazing thing ever to watch people get that light bulb moment when all of a sudden they're like, I can do whatever I want. Well, of course, within reason, but those kind of things, right? It's amazing.
I was speaking with Jose Pereira, the member of the Citgo Six who was hostage for 5 years,
Yeah.
and he's an amazing guy. We just had him on, And one of the things that we talked about was Viktor Frankl's statement between stimulus and response to that space. And that
Yes.
within that space lies our freedom. Well, all of us need to realize, and that's what I help them. The idea of conceiving is to know that you have the power to act.
Yep.
You have the ability to act, to take action. And then when you know that, when you realize you have the ability to take action, then you realize that you have an incredible power to choose. So you can look at all of your choices, all of your options. I tell individuals, stop looking at walls.
Yeah.
Look at the doors and the windows, because that's how you're going to get through.
Exactly. And I have, and I'll quote another wonderful sage: do or do not. There is no try.
Yes.
Yoda. He knows some stuff, man.
He knows some stuff. That's true. Yeah. We're both Marvel and Star Wars fans.
That's right.
Let me ask you, there's, and I ask this question to all individuals at the end of my show, especially with you, because you are literally born with the odds stacked against you, on a life-threatening level. You came through that. You crushed through that. You were able to deal with the bullying throughout childhood. You were able to actually pull yourself up and reach that standard of manhood in the face and in the wake of the death of your mom, who was so supportive and so encouraging, the one that brought you into the world and worked with you. And then now, in spite of the real estate failures, things like that, you moved into therapy, and now you're a life coach. What does it mean to you, Clint Callahan? What does it mean to you to crush your mountain?
It means that I now have the resources and ability to help others crush theirs, because that's what my mom taught me, is that.
Wow.
And you almost made me cry. Thanks, man. Thanks.
Well, listen, that's I think the thing about men not crying is a lie. According to some, in the King James Version, the shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept. So the idea is we share and shed emotion because we are emotional beings. That's how we're created.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I often tell my clients and my clients every time, is I'd love to tell you that human beings are rational with occasional emotion, but that's not the case. We are emotional, and we are very occasionally rational. And that is the piece, is that if the more you understand your emotions, the more that you allow yourself to feel and be seen as the full, flawed, amazing human being that you are, the more that you will feel closer to everything and everybody, and you'll be able to have and be the kind of person, man, woman, transgendered, whatever it is, you can become whatever you need to be, because that's what our job is. That's what our job is as human beings, is to be seen, to see and be seen, and to help each other out.
Well, I want to thank you so very much for popping in here and talking with the audience and sharing what you shared, and sharing a story, because that's what life is. Life is a multitude of stories and overlapping, interlocking circles. When we meet together, our circles are overlapping. My wife and I, your wife and you, we're married. You guys are married. Now your circles are interlocked. So that's the stories that we have, and that's what we share. The more we understand and value those stories, as opposed to what the media tells you, then you start to value one another. And so I always tell everyone at the end of the show this one thing, and I want to encourage everyone to seek out either myself or Clint, any of the other individuals that fits your cards, fits your holes. Any individual, do that so that you can move forward. But until you do, continue coming here. And as I always tell you, don't just climb your mountain, crush it.
That's right.
Through it, and we'll see you next time. Hey man, thank you so very much.
Fantastic. I really enjoyed myself.